Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the movie Elio. Now, I have seen the trailer for this movie a few times, but it wasn't what I would say overly promoted by Disney by an extreme extent by any means, but I digress. So, of course, this is a new entry into Pixar's catalog, which, boy, new catalogs from Disney or Pixar is quite a tall order to expect from either of these, with Disney's remakes and whatnot. And I have to say, I was looking through YouTube, and I'm on the tab right now, and I scrolled down just a bit. I've seen some reviews, but I came across one that immediately grabbed my attention. I just want to read the title verbatim right now. Its title is Elio is the worst Pixar movie ever made. Film Threat Rant by Film Threat. Now this is run by Chris Gore, I believe. And, this is apparently a person who's, deep into movie going, is even in the, in-group of certain groups. And, I gotta say, after reading such a title, I'm a bit perplexed. Do they not know Pixar's entire catalog? You do know that they were the ones who made Cars 2, right? Right? Hell, I would even argue that The Good Dinosaur is a slightly worse movie than this, but not by a wide margin, but the worst Pixar movie ever made is a pretty high or low bar in this instance, so I thought I'd, call that out and call bullshit. I'm here to review this movie properly. Now, I did not watch the video, so I don't know what they're gonna point to. I'm gonna assume it's gonna be some bullshit. I don't know. But I digress. I'm here to review the movie in sequential order, and praise it where it needs to be, and criticize it where it needs to be, and so on and so forth, as fairly as conceivably possible. So the movie opens up, and, again, reviewing this as objectively as possible. We start with Elio, and he is living with his aunt. And we quickly see that they're in, like, this diner area that's, like, I guess joint connected to, like, a space area. But it's, like, blocked off currently. And he currently is, like, hiding underneath the table. And you see that he doesn't have the patch quite yet. We see how he gets it in the movie, in the context for this. But the opening of the movie, I feel like already kind of disproves that entire video's claim that this is the worst Pixar movie ever. I mean, the movie spends a few minutes with him, wandering off into the space program section that's blocked off, it's meant to be, and he turns on the program and it's like introducing him to the world of space. He does not say a single word of dialogue, and you can just see how obsessed he is with space without a single line of dialogue. That is impressive, dear contrast. After all, it has been said by me, and ought to be repeated, that movies are a visual medium, and telling a story through just pure visuals, I mean, you are getting certain bits of dialogue from the presentation aspect of it, but from Elio, you're just seeing his eyes light up in excitement and awe, and even getting emotional. So again, you know just how obsessed he is. Again, from him, no dialogue. You didn't need it. So again, this shows how strong the opening of this movie alone is. And I want to praise it because I was watching other reviews of this movie and I had yet to hear anyone compliment the strong opening for Elio. And I mean incredibly so. So, obviously, we then hear him, after the fact, say that he does indeed want to be abducted by aliens, and does this whole setup on the beach. But he is confronted by two individuals, one named Bryce, I believe, and the other named Caleb. These are sort of these minor characters. Now, he gets the radio, Elio does, this radio to start working and start sending out a potential signal. And this gets Caleb infuriated for whatever reason. I will admit, the side character of this is a little bit weak. Again, criticizing where I feel like the movie can be criticized. Again, being as fair as possible here. But he is a minor character, relatively speaking, so it's not too much of a loss of anything here. At any rate, point being is that they fight over the radio, and I forget exactly the direct interaction, but it does cause Elio's eye to get hit. Now, when I first watched the trailer for this movie, I thought that Elio was going to be an individual who's just going to be born with one eye. I thought that they were going to take the Luca approach of the sailor's name. I don't remember the sailor's name from that. The cool potential father figure for Alberto, that guy. I thought they were going to go that route, but no, he does have both eyes. It's just injured for the majority of the movie. So anyways, point being is that he eventually over here, because he gets picked up by his mom and brought to the work, aunt, rather, not his mom. His parents have passed away, as we learn, because of course. And this is that loss is what drives him, a big part of him, to seek out this exterior companionship. So already we have this really strong narrative coming right back. You know, this sense of connection, and what does that mean? And yeah, I know, themes, and you can criticize me for doing it, but I mean, the way that they're achieving getting us to recognize the themes, I feel like is still pretty strong currently. And I would argue has remained consistent probably throughout the entire movie. At any rate, so he sneaks on when he overhears this overexcited worker who already believes in aliens and saying that they picked up a transmission. It was Elio's transmission that was sort of warbled with something else, apparently so. And Elio gets overly excited by this. So he waits for everyone else to leave and proceeds to send his message outward to whatever picked this message up. This gets the aunt in deep trouble as it does power down a lot of what they're doing for a brief amount of time. So the aunt, in a more traditional sense of, again, kind of pulling back to Luca, in fact, a lot of similarities. So I would argue, if you were interested in Luca, I would say there are some similarities between this and Luca, outside of the whole, the sort of mermaid versus alien thing going on here, obviously. But I digress. So, yeah. The aunt wants to send him to a camp where he can be, quote-unquote, normalized. She went there herself, she claims, bringing him over. And we see more emotional scenes. He is a really emotional character, Elio is, as he heads up to the roof to have a good old cry. And unfortunately for Elio, the two characters, Caleb included, are there also at the camp that he's arrived at. So they're back in the movie. So he sees that they're planning to use his obsession with aliens to try to attempt to freak him out. But he overhears this way before they get to him. So he attempts to flee. And the others begin to try to give chase. Meanwhile, the aunt picks up a strange signal about this "bring us to your leader" message that she receives while working, and now she's sort of, gaining this knowledge. And there is this forward momentum for both characters that I really do enjoy throughout this movie. Anyways, the group catch up with Elio, and they get ready to, Caleb gets ready to beat him up or whatever. The others are, grabbing him. But Elio points out a strange light in the distance, and he's not buying it. And just before getting punched in the other eye, presumably so, Elio closes his one good eye left, and when he reopens it, he notices that everything around him is abruptly frozen. So, it turns out that his message did get across, and that the strange entity shines a beacon over him, and Elio becomes extremely overexcited as he does indeed get his very wish of being abducted by aliens. So, he's brought onto the ship where he meets this little cube being, the one to his right on the poster there, the little cube block. I don't remember this guy's name. He's sort of our exposition character kind of vibe going on, because after all, we as the audience are now also being introduced to this whole new, area of world, so I will allow that to be serviceable. And he is sort of meant to be this robotic guide of sorts. But he's also introduced to these 4 councils of different types of aliens, the ones that you can see on the corners of the poster there. They're the ones who are already interested in wanting Elio to join them in this little council on this planet ship that they got going on here. That seems to be a wide variety of aliens that have conglomerated together in this one area, this one ship, I guess, or armada. I don't know how big it actually is. Hard to say. And it is interesting, and I will point out the potential criticism here. The pink creature you can see on the left poster has the capability to read minds, and she tells them this, and suggest that she could do it to Elio immediately. But the other blob creature, the one on the lower left on the poster there, says that that's, a little too soon of a thing to desire. Now, of course, this is to point out that this would ruin the majority of the movie. Sort of the whole bit about the liar reveal would come out way too soon. So it is a kind of like, okay, so they're kind of treating it like this alien, I guess, like, what's a good way of putting this? It's like a grace period of sorts of, like, in being more open to any given culture, let's say, in comparison, like, if we were just comparing it to Earth's sake for simplicity, like, for example, the whole, certain people do the whole double kiss thing when they're when they're saying hello to each other. That's a very cultural thing that happens, right? That would be an example of that, of course. And on Earth, in those certain areas, they kind of just they kind of just do it. If you're, I think, from what I understand of it. Anyway, so yeah, this is to postpone that inevitable reveal for later on in the movie. But then we're introduced to Great Gragon, I believe his name is. He's the one on top of the poster. He's sort of the antagonist, and I use that word very carefully because he does seem like he could very well be a villain for all intents and purposes. He does thrive on the warring side of wanting war, and some other reviewer brought up Mass Effect, and I do think of this creature as one of the creatures from Mass Effect, the bigger creatures. I don't remember what they're called off the top of my head, because I haven't played Mass Effect ever, so I'm not as familiar with that lore, but anywho, getting back on track and getting back to the movie. So Gragon, he's trying to demand, this sort of control over this area, and the other aliens are not too very keen on letting that happen in this controlling sort of way. So he's planning to attack, potentially. And so they're getting ready to leave, and it seems like their little shuttle ship things are like set to go off almost, and then Elio pipes up saying that he'll be the one to essentially be the ambassador for Earth. So now we're politicking in our Disney movies, which is lovely. Anywho, while this is going on, Elio, after the fact, gets cloned, and it seems like the clone matches him. It does the eye patch as well. Now this is interesting, as we see that it's made up of this goopy material, essentially, underneath, but overall its behavior seems to be able to perfectly mimic Elio. But he tells the clone to behave normally, quote-unquote, and the clone is the one that is sent back to Earth. Remember, the kids are still frozen up until that point. So Elio is, the clone is the one brought back to Earth. He's the one in its place. And time resumes as we see the after effect of him presumably taking the hit, and okay, Disney and Pixar, you're bringing this back, interesting. We actually see blood. Okay! I can respect that. You know, for the worst Pixar movie ever, a little, a little edge, a tiny sliver of edge, is greatly appreciated for the worst Pixar movie ever. I'm gonna keep harping on that because I think that is a dog shit take on this movie. For a movie that, again, has shown quite a lot of potential so far. But, there are, I've pointed out the minor mistakes or little minor criticisms here and there, obviously. But overall, it's still going really well, I would argue. So yes, we do see the clone getting taken up by the mom, and, the mom drives away, and while we see them driving, she is caught off guard immediately, but she's like, okay, something's, a little bit of like, which I do appreciate the messaging that's starting to send about how much she actually does care about Elio, because from Elio's perspective, we even hear him say that you're not family initially. Pretty early on in the movie, I forget where that's placed. That was obviously before he gets taken. But point being is that, she does indeed. We do see her in the way that she does care. That she notices this strange, not caring as much for space all of a sudden as they're riding again back home. Anyway, we're then Elio is then guided to Graygon's ship as he is getting ready to he asks the little guidance floaty thing about how to negotiate, essentially, how to help him do that. So he's written some advice on his hands about what to do. So he has that going for him at the very minimum right now. But he is way over his head, but he's going for it regardless. So he's taken aboard their ship, indeed, and Graygon proposes this gun off moment where they shoot out these little yellow targets that are these little living creatures. Again, I'm gonna re-mention it, a little bit of edge again. Okay, Disney Pixar, for the worst Pixar movie ever. More edge as we see him shoot this thing. It doesn't die necessarily, but it does get injured, I suppose, by a significant degree, losing its feathering as Graygon shoots it. He proposes then that Elio takes a shot, as Elio is fumbling, trying to convince this leader that taking over in this way is not great. So Elio is forced to shoot, so he purposely tries to aim the gun elsewhere. And I'll admit, this got me a good chuckle as he purposely misaims. The blast hits off the edge of the ship, and then hits off another edge of the ship, and then hits the thing, the creature, and he's like, oh god, Elio, you see it on Elio's face, he's like, oh god, and Graygon responds, trick shot, pretty good, that was a pretty good joke, and again, that slight edge, I do appreciate that, again, for the worst Pixar movie ever, I don't know, there's a lot going on here, that I would say, again. But as Elio does, try to talk a little bit more, unfortunately, this leads to Gragon picking up that Elio was not as well prepared as he thought he could be, as something, he says, upsets Gragon to the potentiality and gets him jailed. But while in jail, Elio sees this skull, a skeleton. Edge! Like, okay, again, the third time this has happened, in quick succession, might I add, for the worst Disney Pixar movie ever, quote-unquote. Okay, Disney and Pixar, we're just showing dead bodies, okay. We see Elio lean against said dead body. The skull lands off, and the way, you know, there's the bars in front of him, and there's like this little upward shaft that has like bars on it as well. So he, you know, he's upset, so he kind of tosses the skull in frustration, and it hits that top vent, as I mentioned. And it turns out that that is loose. Now, earlier in the movie setup, he was given this device, we see him using it, to turn off gravity temporarily. And he can turn it back on as well. This device, I'll call it a space badge, essentially. The space badge allows him to, this is the same space badge that allows him to understand and simultaneously communicate with the aliens. You know, it was given to him, I believe, by the little white creature, or by one of the others, I forget which exactly. I think it's the white creature. The white block creature. So he uses that, and he uses the gravity advantage to sneak up, or to boost himself up to that area, and go into said vent. He then proceeds to fall into a web, and we're introduced to Glordon, I believe his name is. Oh, Glodon. I don't think there's a R there. And he quickly discovers that this is the son of Grogon. Glodon. Very similar names, I know. So I'll just call him the son, for simplicity's sake, so I'm not, you know, mismatching that for, you know, for simplicity of said review. So I'll call him the alien son to specify that even further. So anyways, and by the way, this entire opening sequence is treated like this sort of like potential horror vibe going on, where he, you know, from Elio's perspective, where he thinks he's gonna get eaten, and he sees the creature with its various mouths, or teeth, I should rather say. So they get into a cave, you know, or like this little tunnel, rather. And it's one of the projectile areas that's gonna, like, shunt in lava. So Elio gets told by the alien son that if he goes inside of him, that he'll be safe. Yes, there is vor in this movie. I'm just gonna say what it is. Sorry, but that is what that is. So yeah, Elio gets vored by this alien, temporarily speaking. And then proceeds to kind of just open up his mouth and let him back out once the lava has spewed past them. This creature, the alien son, seems to be immune to lava in that sort of way. Or, you know, lava is actually very, you know, embracing, I suppose. Elio had, among the things that was written on his hand, a bargaining chip. And he keeps looking at the alien's son, and he's looking at it back at his hand, and he kind of puts two and two together there. So we learn from the alien son that he learns that the father wants to get him ready for battle. And indeed wants that, for him, very symmetrical to his own journey in this sort of way of Elio and his mother, except it's a reverse mirror, I suppose, of a good way of putting that. Anyway, so then, they have a little bit of time, so we have a little montage of Elio and the alien son hanging out. And we have a nice little moment where they're, chilling, and the little glorb asks about his parents, and it's clearly that they're gone. And we have another really silent moment here. We're turning down the pace from this montage, and we have a nice subtle, this nice slow moment all of a sudden after the fact of him, starting to truly believe that the problem was himself, that he was the problem, and he begins to cry again. And it's like, damn, movie, okay. Jeez, like, talking about placing a heavy burden on himself in that way after all this time. And now it's actually starting to come out. But, of course, we begin to also see, much like him, Glodon, the son, alien son, doesn't want the war as much as Elio wanted to go to space very desperately. Want versus not wanting something, and a father versus, well, in this case, an aunt. Well, virtually a mom, and as much as a replacement can be in that sense. And as, Elio recalls the cloning device. So he brings Glodon, who doesn't want to be war, to the cloning device, and has the son's alien be cloned too. And they're going to use the clone, much like they did earlier, for that. In fact, Elio wants to check on his very own clone to prove that these clones are very much, you can believe them as, the alien son is like, is my dad actually going to believe this? Kind of gets that dialogue directly out, and then they check in, and we see now, from this brief moment, this glimpse back into Earth, that their Elio, the clone, rather, is at home with the mom, and we're seeing the newfound behavior, and the mom being all like, oh, or the aunt, rather. That's how much, I wrote it in my notes, so I kept getting confused. I kept putting mom, because, she's very much behaving in that way throughout the context of this movie, essentially. But again, that suspicion that she had earlier, though she's not showing it quite yet in this little glimpse here, and, Elio turns it off before doing the whole cloning process, but we kind of follow back on, what the mom's up to. Speaking of, we follow back to the mom, and she's had a moment with her son, but she still has that suspicion that we saw from earlier that has not gone away despite that little clip that we saw from their perspective, Elio's perspective. And so she manages to grab a hair off of the clone, and she's getting ready to examine it. The hair begins to move on its own, and the mom follows it back to the bed where the clone currently is sleeping. And so she follows to where the clone is sleeping and looks at the eye patch and actually removes it, and is shocked as there is nothing underneath it. It's just a flat, blank surface. It's not his other eye, which would be the case. You know, it's not like, again, it's not like his eye is actually missing. Or so she's obviously put everything together, and the clone grabs her, and we hear the clone say, you know, something akin to, I should explain, or something along those lines. So yeah, we know something's gonna go down. So while that's going on, we cut back to the clone of the alien, and he, much like the other clone, is behaving in the way that the father, quote unquote, wanted. Wanting to be battle ready. And this gets the father to be suspicious immediately, as the real one is hidden elsewhere on this ship. And it does not take long, by the way. The father dares just suddenly turn around and shoot the clone as they're getting ready. Elio is celebrating, the people there are celebrating, and the father is nonplussed. It captures everybody in his desperation looking for his son at this juncture. But as they're searching for the son ends up accidentally scuttling himself all the way back to Earth. And so we have this moment where Elio is confronted, and the leader is forcing the mind reader to he's trying to get the location of his son, is what he's trying to do at this point. So he's using the mind reader here. So it's now by force that this has now come about. But the mind reader picks up on the rest of what Elio has been thinking throughout the entire movie. Now it's all coming to pass. So she picks up on it, and you can see the expression on herself as she explains where the son is, because she also picked up that level of information too. But she also now knows everything else about that Elio is just a kid and not this great leader, as it turned out. So she makes a portal back to Earth and shunts him through it pretty quickly, or he gets knocked through it rather, as she gets pushed away or something along those lines. So in his emotional state of being rebound to Earth, he cries once more. And he glances over, and he sees his mom and the clone. The clone heads off at some point for looking for something or other, as she's setting up a telescope to look out into space. And see, I said it again. I said mom instinctually. The aunt. Sorry. So the aunt, the real Elio joins her, and she still thinks, because she didn't even notice the clothes change there, I guess. That is a criticism I will point out. I think they're wearing different clothes, the clone and him, I think. I'm pretty sure they are. but I don't think she's like paying too much attention to him directly. She's like kind of focusing on the eye thing, looking at the space. So, the first thing, when Elio kind of pipes up finally, is the mom, or I did it again, the aunt, immediately removes the eye patch, saying his eye actually has now recovered. And then we see the clone return after the fact. And so now the aunt knows that the real son has indeed returned. So, Elio picks up the aunt on everything about the whole alien that has made its way here, and how they need to essentially get there. So, they ride over, and the clone mentions how it can decompose and be reutilized, and it's like this biodegradable material, I guess, essentially is what it's made out of. But the mom and Elio look at each other and say, no, not quite yet. We have one last thing for you to do, actually. So they go to the military base and have the clone decompose in front of the military people. Another quite, interesting bit, I suppose. So they're freaking out, allowing the aunt and Elio to get inside to where the ship is and get inside. So they're inside. Elio knows how to get inside the ship. And we now see the full extent of how much we now know the aunt does care, is that way earlier in the movie, like again before he leaves, he made up this whole language that's, based off his name, Eloise, I think he calls it, essentially. And, this is, again, set up at the beginning of the movie, and now here's the payoff. Setup and payoff. Interesting for the worst movie of Pixar, to have setups and payoffs at all. But hey, here we are. So now it's paid off as we hear the aunt using the language to try to tell the son, because one of the soldiers, or her own helmet, ends up near him, to throw it at the guards, because the guards get to them and they're demanding that they get off the ship, essentially. So eventually, she communicates that, and he does so, allowing them just enough time to launch their ship into space. And during this, they pick up communes with one of the that kid from way before, and as well as the alien obsessed guy Melmac, I believe his name is. But they need to get through this asteroid-like thing coming toward them, and they're getting pelted initially until Melmac gives them the coordinates of each incoming asteroid. And then they get out of range of Melmac, and then other people, I will criticize this, they just happen to also know that they are they're in space somehow. I don't know. Point being is that they essentially get guided out in a pretty cheap way. I will admit that. See, criticizing this movie isn't something that I'm, again, opposed to doing. But again, I'm still being fair. And again, calling this the worst Pixar movie, I think is still a far cry outside of the fight. I would still say this is a, it's a convenience, it's a pretty big one at that, but I digress. Anyways, they are able to warp when they are clear of this hurdle. So they get back to the ship. the alien sun is super cold on Earth, and we see that. But they're getting them back to the planet. And then we see the return. So they hit the area where the father is. And in this moment, we see that receptacle, that mirror, happen in that time. In this time, the son is let out. They get captured like pretty much as soon as they exit the ship. But Elio's like grieving over this, thinking that the son is lost or whatnot. So we learned earlier, as a setup of this, is that taking off this battle armor is like this big respect thing that they got going on in this alien species that are the antagonist, or that's what he says anyways. And to show how much he cares about his son, he takes it off at this moment, payoff, to use his silk abilities that we saw the son use earlier, so we know that they can do that as a species, to warm his son up for the son to wake up. And the son does so. And the father bluntly asks if the son wants to be this war-seeking individual, and the son says no, and the father accepts that the son does not want this. So he agrees to let that just be, and the antagonist says, let everyone go. Okay. Talk about, I guess, a subversion. Again, he had the potential to be a proper villain and just, get ready to continue an attack anyway, but no. He's, again, more akin to an antagonist throughout this movie. So anyways, the aunt sees Elio's excitement as he's given this new badge as a representative of this potentiality. But Elio looks back at the aunt at a certain juncture, and it is the moment where Elio says that he wants to give Earth's shot with her, because she is, as he denied earlier, indeed family. So now that has also come full circle as well. So the mom and Elio, and I did it again, the mom, the aunt and Elio get sent back to Earth. But they get sent back, I think, at night, because we see the glowing object, and a bunch of human beings witness this, and it's this this mesmerizing shot of the spacecraft, getting ready to leave. And after the credits, there's a little moment where Elio makes recontact with his space friend, and now he has a space pen pal, essentially, by the end of the movie. And that's Elio. And you know what? I think this is a strong contender in Pixar's, I would say solid in Pixar's standing. Again, they did make Cars 2, just for that video saying that this is the worst Pixar movie. Yeah, rewatch Cars 2 and say that again. I dare you. But yeah, I think this is a solid movie. There are a few contrivances here and there. The big primary one is the space, them getting through the space, debris, essentially. Like, outside of that issue, I think the rest of the movie is strong enough and solid enough to say it's still a pretty damn solid movie. I do think that the characterization over trumps this, this rather convenience. And I would say they didn't need to have the meteor shower scene happen, I would say. I think that would be the easy fix. Obviously, they wanted a moment of tension or whatever, for whatever purposes, but, I don't necessarily think they needed that. I would have cut it and just had them be able to transfer to the warp drive to the other planet. It's a minor change, but I do think that it would just tighten up that issue. Again, in all essence, it is a relatively small fix. And yeah, again, other than that, I would say this movie is incredibly strong, from its slight edge to its, its moments being able to depict a character's fascination with, any given thing, in this case space, without needing the use of dialogue at all in regards to the opening. In seeing the progression of all, four main characters, in this case, Elio, the aunt, the antagonist being Gordon and his son, and every other character sort of being a side character, or exposition in the case of the white block character. So yeah, I'll probably give this a solid 7 or potentially even 8 out of 10. I'm not quite sure yet. I would, say solid 7 out of 10. I am gonna say, this probably... I'm not gonna be surprised if this does not do as well as, it's the unfortunate state of affairs that more people would be willing to watch remakes rather than something original. In this case, I'm referring to Lilo and Stitch in this case. Another movie, the live-action version anyway, another movie about aliens and coming to Earth in this case. So yeah, I suppose the timing of that is interesting to say the least, but it is a shame that I do think that this movie is, based on what I'm currently seeing, everyone's saying it's, it's okay, other than the obvious video that I pointed out that said it's the worst Pixar movie, which I think is an over-exaggerated, potentiality to try to drive people away from this movie. I even saw another, when I was scrolling down the YouTube videos, one saying that I watched Elio so you don't have to, suggesting that, Elio was going to be bad, or that it is bad, and that you shouldn't have to watch it. So I saw 2, videos in my YouTube thumbnail list suggesting that you shouldn't watch this movie. And it's like, so what, do you want people to just keep watching the remakes? I'm very confused of what these individuals, the ones that are criticizing this movie to that degree, are suggesting to not see the movie at all. It's like, so do you just want Disney to just lean on its remakes more? Because that's what they're gonna do. I'm sorry, but that's sadly the truth of the matter, and the saddened truth of, like, yeah, they're gonna win people back over with that nostalgia bait. It's gonna happen, and you're the side in this case that's gonna be the one to be blamed, because you're the one trying to drive people away from movies like this. It's like, this is a solid movie, so I'm gonna recommend it. If you've made it this far. And if you ended up enjoying this review in full, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, you can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.